Good morning, everyone. I want to start with a confession. I struggled with this title. The word evil is a heavy one, isn't it? It carries weight. It sticks to us. It stirs up memories, fears, and sometimes even shame. But here's what I know from 2 decades of research on vulnerability, shame, and courage. True evil exists, and more importantly, there are patterns, warning signs that we must learn to recognize. I don't say this lightly because I deeply believe in the power of change, redemption, and healing. But some people, whether through trauma, unchecked power, or a complete absence of empathy, become something more than just flawed. They become dangerous, not just to themselves, but to others. So today I want to talk about 5 undeniable signs that someone is operating from a place of true destructive harm. Not just imperfection, not just a bad day, but real, corrosive, life-wrecking harm. Empathy is the foundation of human connection. It's what allows us to understand each other's emotions, to feel with one another, and to build meaningful relationships. When we see someone in pain, our natural instinct, at least for most of us, is to extend kindness, to offer support, and to make sure they don't have to suffer alone. But evil people, they don't operate that way. They don't see vulnerability as an opportunity for connection or care. Instead, they see it as an opening, an exposed wound they can press into, a weakness they can manipulate for their own advantage. They don't just ignore empathy, they actively reject it because empathy would require them to see others as equals, as people with intrinsic worth, and that's not something they're willing to do. Manipulation is their primary weapon. They know exactly what to say to make you trust them, to make you feel safe in their presence, and then, just when you've let your guard down, they use that trust against you. Maybe it starts small, a backhanded compliment that makes you second-guess yourself, a casual remark that leaves you feeling uncertain about your own judgment. Over time, they push further, probing your insecurities, twisting your emotions, and making you doubt yourself in ways you never did before. This is not accidental. Evil people are highly aware of the power they hold over others, and they use it to make sure they always have the upper hand. They know that if they can keep you questioning yourself, you'll be too distracted, too unsure, too exhausted to recognize what they're really doing. This kind of harm isn't always obvious at first. In fact, some of the most destructive people are the ones who appear the most charming, the most charismatic. They're the ones who seem to have a gift for making people feel seen, at least in the beginning. They know how to mirror your emotions, how to say the right things at the right time, how to make you feel like you found someone who truly gets you, but it's not real. It's a carefully crafted illusion, a mask they wear to lure people in before revealing who they truly are. And once they do, they're no longer the person you thought you knew. They become dismissive, cruel, even indifferent to your pain, because now they don't need to pretend anymore. They've already gotten what they wanted from you. And here's the worst part. When they've drained you, when they've taken everything they can, they don't feel remorse. They don't look back. They move on to the next person, the next opportunity, the next source of supply. Because to them, people are not people. They're resources, tools, means to an end, and the cycle continues. But here's what we have to remember. Recognizing this pattern is power. Understanding how these people operate is how we protect ourselves, how we reclaim our strength, and how we make sure that our vulnerability, our humanity, is never used against us again. One of the most defining characteristics of truly harmful people is their complete and utter refusal to take responsibility for their actions. Accountability is a fundamental part of being a decent human being. We all make mistakes, we all hurt others, sometimes intentionally, sometimes unintentionally. But what sets us apart is our ability to own up to our wrongdoings, to apologize sincerely, and to make amends. Evil people, they never do this. They are masters of avoidance, blame shifting, and rewriting history to serve their own narratives. If they are caught in a lie, they will find a way to twist reality until they are the victim, and you are the villain for even questioning them. Confrontation is not met with reflection or remorse. It is met with defensiveness, rage, or icy indifference. They will gaslight, manipulate, and distort facts just to avoid admitting they were wrong. At first, this pattern might be hard to recognize. These people don't always deny things outright. Instead, they subtly distort reality in a way that leaves you doubting yourself. Maybe you bring up something hurtful they said, and instead of apologizing, they respond with, "I never said that. You must have misunderstood." Or worse, "You're too sensitive. You always make a big deal out of nothing." Over time, these constant denials make you question your own memory, your own perception of events. They condition you to second-guess yourself, to wonder if maybe you are the problem. This is gaslighting, and it is one of the most insidious forms of emotional abuse. The goal is to make you feel so unsure of yourself that you stop challenging them altogether. Because if you can't trust your own mind, then who do you have to rely on? Them. And that's exactly where they want you, under their control. Another tactic evil people use to avoid responsibility is playing the victim. No matter what they've done, they will find a way to make themselves the one who has been wronged. Maybe you call them out for something hurtful, and suddenly they're crying about how you don't appreciate them. Maybe they lie, cheat, or manipulate, and instead of acknowledging it, they spin a tragic backstory about how they've been betrayed before, how the world has been unfair to them, how their behavior is justified because they've been through so much. And here's the dangerous part. Because most of us do have empathy, it's easy to fall into this trap. It's easy to soften, to think maybe they didn't mean it, maybe they're just hurting. And that's exactly how they get away with it, by weaponizing your compassion against you. But here's the truth. No amount of pain or hardship justifies mistreating others. We all have past wounds, we all have struggles. But decent people don't use their suffering as an excuse to harm. They don't dodge responsibility by pointing fingers at their past or blaming other people for their actions. When someone never admits fault, never apologizes in a real way, never makes a genuine effort to change, that is not just a flaw. That is a deliberate choice. A choice to protect their ego at the expense of truth. A choice to prioritize power over connection. A choice to remain stagnant rather than evolve. And that is what makes them dangerous. One of the most dangerous traits of truly harmful individuals is their ability to strip others of their humanity. Dehumanization is at the core of all great evils throughout history, whether in personal relationships, workplaces, communities, or even on a global scale. When someone stops seeing people as individuals with thoughts, feelings, and intrinsic worth, they begin to justify treating them as objects, obstacles, or tools to be used. Evil people engage in dehumanization because it allows them to harm without guilt. If they can convince themselves that their victims are somehow less than, less intelligent, less deserving, less valuable, then they can mistreat them without the burden of remorse. This is not just an unconscious bias or a fleeting moment of cruelty. It is a deeply ingrained belief that enables their ability to manipulate, abuse, and destroy without feeling the weight of their actions. At its most subtle, dehumanization starts with disrespect and small acts of maybe they make cutting remarks about someone's worth, intelligence, or identity, slowly eroding their sense of self. Maybe they treat certain people as invisible, ignoring their needs, contributions, or voices. Over time, this escalates into full-scale emotional, psychological, or even physical abuse. A person who dehumanizes others does not see relationships as mutual experiences of care and understanding. Instead, they view others as mere instruments for their own desires. Whether that means using someone for money, status, validation, or even just the twisted satisfaction of control. When they are done extracting what they need, they discard their victims without a second thought. It is not that they lose interest or drift apart like in normal relationships. It is a conscious, callous abandonment because in their eyes, the person was never truly human to begin with. What makes this trait so insidious is that evil people often mask their dehumanization under the guise of superiority. They convince themselves that others are weak, naive, or unworthy of kindness and respect. They create hierarchies in their mind, placing themselves at the top and viewing others as beneath them. You'll hear it in the way they talk about people, reducing them to labels, stripping away their complexity, speaking about them as if they are nothing more than caricatures. They might say things like, "People are so stupid, they deserve to be manipulated," or, "If they let me treat them this way, that's their problem." These statements reveal a chilling truth. They do not see others as equals. They see them as disposable entities whose suffering is either irrelevant or, worse, amusing. The most frightening part, dehumanization is often contagious. When one person with power, influence, or control normalizes treating others as lesser, that mindset spreads. In toxic workplaces, it creates cultures of cruelty. In personal relationships, it fuels cycles of abuse. On a societal level, it justifies oppression, violence, and even atrocities. This is why recognizing dehumanization is so crucial. When someone consistently disregards the dignity of others, when they treat people as expendable, when they mock or dismiss suffering instead of acknowledging it, that is not just a character flaw. That is the foundation of true evil. And the moment we stop seeing it for what it is, we risk becoming complicit in it. One of the most effective tools of truly harmful individuals is their ability to manipulate reality through secrecy and isolation. They understand, often instinctively, that their power is strongest when they operate in the shadows. Evil does not flourish in environments where truth is openly discussed, where people feel safe to share their experiences, or where accountability is valued. Instead, it grows in spaces where silence is enforced through intimidation, manipulation, or outright control. These people create systems, whether in personal relationships, workplaces, or even entire communities, where questioning them feels dangerous and speaking up comes with consequences. The more isolated their victims are, the more control they have over them, and the harder it becomes for those victims to recognize just how toxic the situation has become. This isolation is often a gradual process. At first, it might look like simple possessiveness or overprotectiveness. Maybe they subtly discourage you from spending time with certain friends or make you feel guilty for seeking support outside of them. Over time, this escalates into more overt control, cutting you off from loved ones, discouraging you from sharing personal struggles, or even actively sowing distrust between you and others. They thrive on division because a person who is surrounded by support is far harder to manipulate. They might spread rumors, create conflict, or twist reality so that you begin to see allies as enemies. They want you to feel alone because an isolated person is far easier to control. And once they have convinced you that no one else understands you, that no one else is trustworthy, they become the only voice in your head. And that is when they have you exactly where they want you. Secrecy is another key ingredient in their power. Evil people go to great lengths to ensure that their actions remain hidden. They are experts at maintaining different personas depending on their audience. To the outside world, they might appear charming, successful, even generous. But behind closed doors, they are entirely different. This is why so many people struggle to believe victims when they finally come forward. Because the public persona of an evil person is often carefully curated to appear the opposite of what they truly are. They create an environment where those who speak the truth are labeled as dramatic, unstable, or even outright liars. They know that as long as they control the narrative, they can continue their behavior without fear of consequences. This is why so many victims of abuse, manipulation, and psychological warfare struggle to find support. Because by the time they try to speak up, the abuser has already laid the groundwork to discredit them. But perhaps the most sinister aspect of secrecy and isolation is the way it forces victims into self-doubt. When someone is trapped in an environment where their reality is constantly denied, where they are gaslit into believing they are imagining things, they start to question their own perception of the world. And when you cannot trust your own mind, it becomes nearly impossible to break free. This is how evil people maintain control. not just through physical isolation, but through mental imprisonment. They make sure that even if you do manage to leave, their voice still lingers in your head, making you wonder if you were the problem all along. The real danger of secrecy and isolation is that it doesn't just cut people off from others, it cuts them off from themselves. There is a fundamental difference between people who make mistakes and people who are truly evil. Most of us, at some point in our lives, have hurt someone, intentionally or unintentionally. But when we realize the harm we've caused, we feel guilt, remorse, or at the very least, a desire to make things right. Evil people do not experience this. In fact, they go one step further. They enjoy causing harm. They take pleasure in seeing others in pain, whether that pain is emotional, psychological, or even physical. They do not just lack empathy. They actively seek out situations where they can exert power over others in a way that causes suffering. And that is what sets them apart from the average flawed human being. This tendency to derive pleasure from others' suffering manifests in different ways. Some do it subtly, perhaps through constant passive-aggressive jabs, humiliating comments, or actions designed to make others feel small. They might pick apart someone's insecurities in a way that seems playful on the surface, but is actually deeply calculated to wound. Others are more overt in their cruelty. They revel in watching people fail, struggle, or lose hope. If they see someone in a vulnerable position, instead of offering help, they might push them further down, just to see how much control they can exert. This is especially true in situations where they believe they have power over someone, whether in relationships, workplaces, or social dynamics. They seek out weakness not to offer support, but to exploit and dominate. The worst part is that these people often justify their actions by convincing themselves that their victims deserve it. They tell themselves that people are weak, naive, or foolish for allowing themselves to be hurt. They believe that kindness is a flaw, that compassion is a weakness, and that the world is a place where only the strongest, meaning those who can be the most ruthless, deserve to succeed. This mindset allows them to inflict suffering without guilt because in their minds they are simply enforcing a harsh but necessary reality. They do not see themselves as cruel, they see themselves as superior. And because of this, they rarely stop on their own. They will continue to harm, manipulate, and destroy as long as they can get away with it. Because for them, there is no internal voice telling them to stop. This is what makes true evil so terrifying. It is not just the absence of goodness, but the deliberate rejection of it. It is not just an inability to feel empathy, but a conscious choice to disregard it. These people do not simply hurt others, they seek out ways to do so. They are drawn to destruction, control, and the suffering of others because, to them, it is a form of power. And as long as they are able to cause pain without consequence, they will continue to do so. Recognizing this trait is not about paranoia, it is about awareness. Because once we see this pattern for what it is, we can begin to protect ourselves from those who would take joy in our suffering. So where does that leave us? What do we do with this knowledge? Because it's not enough to simply recognize these patterns. We have to act on them. We have to protect ourselves, our communities, and the people we love from the influence of those who thrive on deception, manipulation, and cruelty. And that starts with something simple but powerful, trusting ourselves again. Evil people want you to doubt yourself. They want you to second-guess your instincts, question your memories, and silence that little voice inside you that says, "This isn't right." But here's the truth. That voice is there for a reason. It's your intuition. It's your inner wisdom. And when someone makes you feel like you can't trust it, that is the biggest red flag of all. The moment you start listening to yourself again, really listening, is the moment you take your power back. We don't defeat evil by becoming like it. We don't win by hardening our hearts or shutting down our empathy. The answer isn't to live in fear, constantly looking over our shoulders, wondering who might be out to get us. The answer is in boundaries, in self-respect, in surrounding ourselves with people who uplift rather than tear down. It's in choosing love, but love that is strong, that is discerning, that refuses to be manipulated or used as a weapon against us. Because at the end of the day, we are not here to be victims of other people's darkness. We are here to stand in our own light. And once we recognize the signs, once we understand the patterns, once we commit to never letting our kindness be mistaken for weakness, we become untouchable. Evil may exist, but it does not define us. We define us. And that is the greatest power of all.